Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Today we are going to talk about one of the new classes in the Risk and Rewards playtest. So this playtest just came out today, and I will have a link so you can go find it for yourself in the description here. And I'm not doing my usual thing, as you can tell. No, I want to do this more as kind of a first impressions. Now, granted, I've already looked through this, but pretty quickly. And I want to give my first impressions while still going through the basics so you can understand how the class works, get a good feel for at least all the initial feats. I probably won't go through every single feat, and then give my general thoughts on the class. We'll start today with the Daredevil and jump into our second class for the playtest as soon as I can get to it. So let's go ahead and dive in here. Now, this style, I've definitely watched plenty of people who make videos of this style, and I think it's really helpful for this kind of video as we kind of go through this together. So diving right in here, risks and rewards, the Daredevil. So the theme here is you have no fear for your own life. You're going to get right into the fray, and you are a marshal. So this time we are the type of marshal that can choose either strength or dexterity, which gives us a little flexibility, which I do like. We're only getting 8 plus Arcon though in hit points, so just keep that in mind. You're not, I mean, you're a far cry from things like the Barbarian, but you know, you're not even keeping up with things like the Fighter or the Monk in hit points. Could be a problem, but we'll see as we get further in here. Maybe okay. Expert in perception, reflex, and fortitude saves, but only trained in will saves. As far as our skills, it's kind of nice. We get trained in both acrobatics and athletics right away. And then we get a number of additional equal to 4 plus our int mod. This doesn't seem like a class so far that I think is leaning you towards having a high int, but even 4 plus, even if you have no plus to your int, is still 4 more, and you're going to end up with plenty of skills. So I don't think you're hurting there. We get trained in simple, martial, and unarmed. Getting the martial, obviously, is what we're really looking for, so that's good to know, but we are martials, I'd expect it. As far as armor goes, though, we're stuck at light armor. Now, fitting, I think, for the way the class is built, but it is something to keep in mind. If you're going to go with the strength version, you're still going to need enough dex to make up for the fact that you just have light armor. And then, of course, our class DC. As we jump into the rest of it here, we've got some things that we expect, so I'll try to move through this in a way that makes sense and keep things on screen for you here. But class features, ancestry, background, attribute boosts, none of that's anything unusual, proficiencies, all that stuff. So let's get into our first actual feature, which is adrenaline. And adrenaline works kind of like the panache for a swashbuckler, and there's plenty of other things to compare to the swashbuckler here, I think, but you're gaining adrenaline from using any action that has the risky trait. And you'll see that pop up plenty in this, but there's also going to be risky that is possibly added to other things you can do. So we've got the risky trait, and that's really what it's doing for us, right? It's giving us the adrenaline, and the adrenaline lasts until the start of your next turn once you have it. So once you get it, you've got it for your whole turn, but then you have to get it again next turn. Again, similar-ish to panache, although panache works a little bit different from that. That's the general idea. Now, while you can certainly get adrenaline from risky trait actions, you can also get it just doing risky things, right? Work it with your GM, have fun with it. I like that they give some options here, things to think about, right? Leaping over a chasm or running quickly across hazardous terrain, which is terrain that actually hurts you. The idea here is you're doing something where either you are certainly getting hurt, or there's a good chance you'd get hurt, something goes horribly wrong. So you're risking your own life to do it, and that's giving you an adrenaline boost. The interesting thing about adrenaline is you don't get the adrenaline after you take the risky trait action. No, you get adrenaline at the start of it. So if you're doing something risky like jumping over a chasm, you actually gain the adrenaline for the jump as well as for the rest of the turn, which is very cool. So I do like that in here. Now they do give us an action right away that has the risky trait, which we just get for free at level 1, and that is Daring Stunt. This is one action, and you can use it once per round. You're basically just going to go ahead and stride or leap up to an enemy. Now you're just striding or leap. You don't have to necessarily enter that enemy, but you're going to stride or leap, and You can, if you have burrowing, climbing, flying, swimming, all that, you can use those instead. But you have to move at least 10 feet, and the idea is you're ending your movement adjacent to one enemy, and when you end that movement, you can attempt to grapple, reposition, shove, or trip one enemy within your reach as part of this action. Now you have to meet all the requirements of it, so you have to have like free hands and all that, but for one action, you get to stride and do that, and you gain adrenaline all together. That's actually a pretty solid action. So I think giving that up front helps set you up for starting out at level 1 with some interesting things to do. But it's definitely setting you up for a grapple build, which leans toward strength and athletics, which is interesting when you've got the light armor kind of setting you more up for dexterity. But we'll see as we go forward. You could probably play it either way, just keep it in mind. Then we have Audacious Combatant. This is just saying that, hey, as long as you've got adrenaline going, and you're probably going to want to get it going most rounds at the start anyway, as long as you've got it going, and you make an attack as part of an action with press trait, then your multiple attack penalty is lower. Keep in mind that the press trait means that it's not your first action with the attack trait that round, right? It has to be a follow-up. That's the only way you can use something with the press trait on it. So this is helping you with the fact that you're going to be doing something that is penalized by multiple attack penalty. Then we've got the Daredevil feats. Obviously you get those at level 1. For Marshall, of course, we get one at level 1. Daredevil's Endurance, this is actually kind of nice. For free, you're going to gain the Die Hard General feat. And this is important because you might want to think about this with your skills. When you receive healing from treat wounds or battle medicine, so things from the medicine skill, you gain a bonus to that equal to your level. Not a ton at level 1, but it's nice that it just goes up for you, for free. Just any bonus healing is going to feel good. Then, again, we're still doing our basic level 1 stuff here. So gaining all of our cool abilities for the base class. Daredevil's Stunt. So this is just getting us another feat, but this is very specific. And you'll see there's a lot of level 1 feats here. This is saying you're going to choose a level 1 feat that has the risky trait. So you get one free level 1 feat. It doesn't have to have risky, just whatever level 1 feat you want for your class. And then you're going to get another one that it has to have the risky trait. Similar to how kineticists get, they can have a general level 1 feat, and then they get feats tied to the element that they chose, to the gate. Same idea here. Now notice in the sidebar here, there's, and I'm going to get to this right now because we're going to get into it, but they talk about risky. We already talked about what risky means. You're going to gain adrenaline from using actions with a risky trait. Oppress is one that's been around forever. Flourish pops up a lot in the class. You can only use one action with the Flourish trait per turn, per round. And then there's something new in here called Prop. And this is kind of cool. So a prop is anything large enough that you can basically push off of it. So this could be a wall, this could be a railing, a large stone, a tree. This can even be a creature as long as it's at least one size larger than you, and they give an example of things that might not make sense even if they meet the general requirements, like you can't push off of a large ooze because if you pushed against it with your foot would just slide on into the ooze. So a little bit of GM fiat there, but mostly it's things you could easily push away from and they're not going to move themselves. You just get an extra boost. Having said that, propelling strides, this is still a level 1 feature here. You can push yourself off of a wall or a large creature to gain some speed. So this is any prop. If you are adjacent to a prop at the beginning of a move action, you gain a plus 10 foot circumstance bonus to the speeds. That's any move action. So if you can fly, you're going to fly. Fly is a move action. Counts for that as well. If you're pushing off underwater, part of your swim, counts for that as well. This is just nice. It gives you a lot of speed. Your positioning matters more than it would for other classes if you want to get that boost. And our final level 1 feature here is Stunt Damage. When you smash your enemy into the scenery, it does real damage. Whenever you have adrenaline, so you already have to have adrenaline, and force a target to move, the movement is interrupted by a prop, which means you're like pushing them into it. Then the target takes damage, bludgeoning damage, equal to 1d6 plus your strength modifier, so that definitely leans you back toward that strength build. And this increases at 5th level, 9th level, 13th, and 17th level. Now, keep in mind this is what's called stunt damage, because this does come up in the feats where they'll say you do X, Y, and Z and the creature takes stunt damage. So you don't always have to meet these requirements. These are the base requirements to do the stunt damage, but stunt damage can happen from other actions you take as well. Then we got some of our basics as we level up. We've got our skill feats, deny advantage, which is something that we've seen in other classes, but is useful, so you're not off guard in a lot of cases where you otherwise would be. Galvanized mobility is also at their level, which is interesting. So with this one, you gain a circumstance bonus, a +1 bonus to your AC against attacks from reactions, which, considering they want you up in the face of your enemies a lot, but you're not great to just stand next to them, it's good that you have some sort of defense against that. And it goes up to +2 while you have adrenaline. So if you've got adrenaline this turn and you need to do an in and out strategy, you're at least not in a terrible way, but it's still not great because they're still going to get attacks of opportunity against you, so be wary. Of course, we've got general feats coming in as well at 3rd level, and we get skill increases. All of that is pretty normal stuff. We're also going to go up to expert in our will saves, ancestry feats at 5th level, as well as weapon expertise. All of that's just kind of usual stuff. At 7th level, we're going to get evasive reflexes, so that we get our proficiency rank in reflex going up to master, which is great. And getting a success is a critical success on reflex save. So getting that already at 7 feels really good. Weapon specialization at 7th as well. Perception mastery going at 9th. Then we get something unique at 9th, which is stunt flexibility. So this time, when you make your daily prep, you can replace that feat you took at level 1 that forced you to have the riskier trait on it. Now you can choose a different one to replace it every single day up to 6th level or lower. Gives you a lot more options. There's plenty of things with the risky trait, so it gives you lots of options of what you want to fill into that flexible feat spot. Then we have Daredevil expertise, raising up your class DC at 11th, with light armor expertise at 13th, which is fine, but again, if you're strength based, it's not ideal. But weapon mastery, so going all the way up to master finally at 13th with our weapons, standard stuff. Greater weapon specialization at 15th, again, nothing crazy there. Now we have improved stunt flexibility, so stunt flexibility at 9th, giving us a little more options. Improved stunt flexibility at 15th means now every daily prep, instead of just choosing one feat with the risky trait, we're actually going to choose 2 of them. One can be as high up as 8th level, and the other one can be as high up as 14th level. So you're getting 2 feats that you're replacing that you got just 1 before. They just have to have the risky trait on them, and trust me, that's not going to be hard to fulfill. Then we have Daredevil's Fortitude, finally getting that Fortitude save up, which is definitely helpful. And during Adrenaline, this is just increasing your DC, but also when you gain Adrenaline, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to half your level that lasts until the beginning of your next turn. You are gaining Adrenaline probably, or most likely, or you should be getting it pretty much every turn. So when you get this, you're gaining just 9 temporary hit points every single turn. That's not bad, especially considering your hit points are going to be lower than other marshals. So I think that's kind of a huge boost at this point in my mind. And then, of course, you get your light armor to master now at 19th level as well. So there's the base of the class. There's no subclass here, right? It's just how you build it with what you want to take. So we've got a few classes like this at this point, and this fits alongside those things like, the fighter and monk and the guardian, I guess. Yeah, I think that's all of them at this point. So what do some of these feats look like? Well, I'm going to go through all the level 1 feats. I'll probably go through a lot of the level 2 feats, but I'm not going to go through everything. There's a lot here. Being a class that doesn't have subclasses, it has an exceptionally high number of feats. So let's just go ahead and jump in here. Bold Bluffs. This only has the Daredevil trait. I'll only call it out if it has other traits from now on, because of course they all have the Daredevil trait. Your tricks allow you to find a weak spot. Basically, you attempt to feint, and that adds the risky trait. So anytime you feint, you're gaining the risky trait on it, which means you gain adrenaline when you feint, which actually a nice way to get some adrenaline going. Then we have Breakaway Attack. Now pay attention to this one, because there are things that build off of this, and we'll see them coming up a few times. In fact, I'll mention a few of them because I think that's pretty fun. This is a type of attacking, a style that I know I've got players that really like the idea of it, one in particular who loves this kind of thing, and we haven't had a great build for it so far, so it really fits here. So this has Flourish, keep in mind, right? Only one Flourish per round, and the risky trait, so you're getting Adrenaline here too. You are going to grab something from the environment. Could be anything. Could be examples they have here. You could be throwing a pot or pan. You could, kick something loose at somebody, slam a door against them, pick up a glass bottle and chuck it. All sorts of interesting things. So lots of ways to just grab things, and you're going to make an attack with it. So you can interact with the item, making a melee or ranged strike with it as appropriate for what you describe, right? Depends on what you're doing with it. You get to decide. Any fundamental runes you have on your hand wraps of Mighty Blows apply to the strike. That's melee or ranged. The melee strike has the finesse traits and deadly D8 traits, and it deals 1d8 bludgeoning damage, so those are already good numbers. And then a ranged strike has the range increment of 20 feet, deadly D10 and propulsive, and deals 1d6 bludgeoning damage. And then if it was a mundane level 0 item that you had in your hand, it's going to be destroyed after you use it. Otherwise, it's going to fall to the ground in the target's space. The GM can, of course, determine different damage types if bludgeoning doesn't make sense for what you're describing, but that's the basics, and those are good damage numbers. Honestly, for just grabbing anything around you and fitting that fantasy, it's probably the best version that I think we've seen so far. All right, then we jump down. We have Don't Mess With Me. You have to be trained in Intimidation, and you have your Adrenaline going here. This has the emotion, fear, mental, and visual traits. So just keep that in mind, right? Anything that's mindless won't be affected. And this triggers when you get a critical hit on an enemy. So great, you crit them. Now you can attempt to demoralize a creature within 60 feet, and you don't have to use verbal cues to do that. There's no auditory side of it, right? You're just scaring them with a look. We've seen this other places as well, but it is nice to have. And, you don't have a particularly high chance, like you just have normal chance to crit, but it'll still have enough that I think you can get value out of it, assuming you're not going to use your reaction for anything else. And there's no reactions built into the base class, so nothing's currently fighting with you for your reaction. And then Flying, Hurdle, Stunt. This has the attack, press, and risky traits. Risky meaning, right, we're going to get our adrenaline from it, but we've got multiple attack penalty, and we have press here. Press and attack go together on, I think, everything that I can think of. So, meaning not every attack has press, but every press has attack. You can't be more than one size larger. Sorry. The target can't be more than one size larger than you for you to do this. You forcefully grab an opponent and flip yourself over its head. Again, really fitting a certain style here, right? You're just going to make an athletics check against the reflex DC of the creature within your reach. The crit success here is really strong. You enter their space, and the target is moved up to 10 feet toward your space, so you're kind of swapping with it, but doesn't trigger any reactions. If it's not enough room for your enemy to move into your space, then it won't work, but otherwise, you're going to switch places essentially, and then gain a +1 circumstance bonus to melee strikes against the target until the beginning of your next turn. The success is the same, except you don't get that bonus to your melee strikes, so it's just okay at that point. The failure, okay, so yes, you don't get to do all of this, but you can immediately step, and you still have to remain adjacent to it, but at least you can step, even though you don't get to do the whole flip over it. But crit fail, and there's a lot of things in here with bad crit fails, you're going to become clumsy 1 until the beginning of your next turn, and you trigger any reactions as if you had performed the manipulate action. So you're going to trigger reactive strikes and be clumsy, and that's really bad. So make sure that you pretty much know you can pull this off. All right, next up we have Forceful Kickoff Stunt. Again, we're talking about creatures that can't be more than one size larger than you. That's pretty common in this whole class. You get to push that creature away with your foot, basically, right? You press your foot up against it and push them. Again, really great outcomes on your critical success. Now, this is acrobatics against Fortitude DC, so it gives you a different ability or a different skill to use, which is nice. It depends on which one you're leaning, Dex versus your strength. The target is pushed 15 feet away in a crit success, and then you leap away from the target at the same time, and this doesn't trigger reaction. So you can gain some serious distance and reposition yourself and a foe. Success, looks pretty much the same, only the target's only pushed 5 feet, but you're still leaping away from it. So still great for you here, not triggering reactions. On a failure, you still leap away. So you still get to leap away from it, but notice it doesn't say anything about not triggering reactions. You do at least trigger them now. And on a crit fail, your stunt backfires and you become off guard. As usual, crit fails are not great, but you should, if you're putting all your points into acrobatics and buffing your dex, you're probably going to be okay here. But Fortitude DC can be a scary thing to go against. Then we have Pressing Pummel. This has the Flourish and Press traits. And you have to have Adrenaline in order to even do this one. I hate how many things we've had with Press now. There's just all kinds of Press going on here, but it's not going to go away. You put all your might behind a follow-up attack. So again, you've already made an attack. That's why you have Press going. Here you're going to make a melee strike as part of this 2 actions. And if you hit, you're going to deal extra 1d10 damage, going up to 2d10 at 10th and 3d10 at 18th level. This is a power attack of sorts. That's what this is. It's just a power attack with multiple attack penalty. I really don't like that, personally. That worries me. But a lot of these worry me because the Press trait is really tough. Then we have Rebounding Fall Stunt. Again, foe can't be more than 1 size larger than you. This time, you're going to make an acrobatics check against the 4 DC once again. And again, we've got attack, press, and risky here. And it has to be somebody, of course, within your reach. On a crit success, though, the target's going to fall prone, and you're going to deal stunt damage to them, and then you immediately stand. So part of this is you are falling prone while doing this, but on a crit success, you get to stand right up, and you don't trigger any reactions, but you do knock them prone. And like I said, we brought up the whole stunt damage thing. You're going to deal that stunt damage now, which is better than like regular trip damage. Success, same idea, but the target's not going to take the damage. At least they'll still be prone and you won't be. On a failure, though, you're going to end up prone, but it's not as bad as it sounds because you can still crawl away from them immediately. And by that, I take it as part of this. You get to crawl away from them. So at least you're not in a terrible situation necessarily, but it's still not good. And of course, crit fail, all bad. You're going to take damage, you're going to fall, and you can't stand up until your next turn, which is brutal. So this is like, obviously it's not your opening action because it's a press trait, but if your second action is this, you're stuck with doing things on the ground now. Scrambling Retreat, no special traits here, but a reaction. And the trigger is you're targeted by a melee attack. This has some build arounds later on too, by the way. And you have to have adrenaline and you aren't encumbered. So you had an adrenaline last turn, all throughout the turn. Enemy comes up to you, melee attack. You're going to gain +2 circumstance bonus to your AC against the attack. And then after that attack, whether it hits you or not, you can stride up to half your speed. Now, if you do, the attacker can follow you as a free action, keeping with you during, all of your movement until you stop or they have moved their full speed. So if for some reason, your half speed is further than their full speed, they can't keep up with you, but that seems unlikely. So they're going to stay right with you. What I like here is you're repositioning and you're determining where you're going. So they might follow you, but if following you means they have to go right past your ally who's got a big 2-handed weapon and is going to use reactive strike to smack them around as they go past, they might not want to follow you. And then you just get away. And that completely ruins the rest of the enemy's turn. Still at level 1 feats here, by the way. Let's finish them up with Wheeling Pull Stunt. And again, targeted creature, no more than 1 size larger than you. You pull at an enemy's armor or clothes to shift their position. So you're going to attempt athletics check this time against reflex DC. We've again got multiple checks against different DCs, and that's within reach. Crit success, your target is grabbed until the end of your next turn, unless you move or your target escapes. You step away from the target and move the target up to 10 feet. It must remain adjacent to you and remains grabbed. So you get to grab and reposition a creature. Really could be advantageous setting up your allies or yourself in a much better position. And then we've got, did I talk about this again? Sorry, I think I forgot, but attack, press, and risky. I forgot to bring it up, but again, it's that situation. So keep in mind, we got press going on here. Success, same as critical success, but your step, you only move the target 5 feet. And then on a failure, If you already had them grabbed or restrained, then that condition ends. You can still step though, so you still get away at least. Crit fail though, of course, is just terrible, and you trigger reactions as if you had moved out of the square you started in, so triggering reactive strike potentially. Lots of level 1 feats have the risky trait, so easy to fulfill finding one with a risky trait, but notice that of all of them, how many do we have that have the risky trait but no press trait? Breakaway attack. That's it. It's the only level 1 risky trait feat without press. So if you really don't like multiple attack penalty, and I don't, it's going to be hard to find risky actions you really want to take. So again, I'm not going to go through everything, but I am going to go through our level 2s real quick, and then I'll probably jump around some. So at level 2, we've got Roaming Charge. This is 2 actions. No extra traits on this one, which is cool, but you have to have Adrenaline. So this time you're going to go ahead and stride twice. You have 2 actions, you're striding twice, which is great. You can move through enemies as part of this, and when you move through them, you deal stunt damage. So you're just hurting a couple enemies as you reposition yourself. You can trigger reactions with this, which is really scary, and you can't end your movement inside the space of another creature, but you are going through them. It's the triggering reactions thing that's really scary, so if you know creatures don't have reactive strike, great. You can reposition and possibly deal little extra damage, but the damage might not be worth it if you can trigger reactions. Then we have Opening Gambit, and this is during initiative. This does have risky and the fortune traits. So combat starts, you're going to attempt acrobatics or athletics against a standard DC for the highest level creature. So if you're just against a bunch of minions or things, lower level than you, this is going to be great. If you've got some creature 4 levels higher than you, probably iffy. Though the GM can assign a different DC here. Anyway, you're just going to roll on a success. Then your initiative becomes 19 plus your modifier means you're going first. You're almost certainly going first. And on a failure, your initiative is 1 plus your initiative modifier, almost certainly going last. So yes, it is certainly a gamble to do this, but I think honestly, most of the time, because your acrobatics or athletics, one of the two is going to be really high, it's probably worth it. It's a pretty decent chance to go first every combat. Next, we have Stunt Driver. Now, this is having training in certain driving, right? Driving lore, piloting, sailing, which is kind of fun and on its own. It's kind of a solo thing hanging out here, but I like it. When you take a reckless action while piloting a vehicle, that action gains the risky trait, and you gain a +2 circumstance bonus to the piloting check to keep control of the vehicle, and you treat all vehicles as props, regardless of their size, which something like if you're on a ship or something, the whole ship is a prop for you. So you can always use it for extra speed or other things that require props later on, which is pretty cool. So if you're going to be sailing a lot, you're on an airship, I don't know, if for some reason you're driving a lot somewhere, pretty cool, actually. Just a little more narrow than other things, but very fun. Then we have Trip Up. This has the press trait, and you're going to follow up an attack with a sweeping blow. So you're going to make a strike. If you hit and deal damage, the target is Clumsy 1 until the beginning of your next turn, or Clumsy 2 on a critical strike. 2 actions for that. I don't know that I think it's amazing for 2 actions, but it's not terrible. So it might be worth it, but again, it's got the press trait. So the chance of missing is higher than normal, and you're using 2 actions on it. Next, we have Tumbling Tricks. No extra traits here, but you have to be trained in acrobatics for it, which you're going to want to if you're going to do it anyway. You're going to be tumbling through here. At least whenever you do tumble through, you're going to gain the risky trait for tumbling through. And there are slightly different outcomes. So on a crit success, your movement doesn't trigger reactions when you tumble through, which is great. And critical failure, you get the same outcome as a failure, and you are off guard until the beginning of your next turn. So you don't want the critical failure anyway for tumble through, but this makes it really bad. But again, if you're tumbling through, it's probably because you took high acrobatics, and you're probably okay most of the time. Not triggering reactions is huge. And our final is, for level 2 anyway, is Wall Sweep. So this is if you would be moved by forced movement, and that does happen enough. You have to have adrenaline, and you have to have adjacent to at least one prop. So, you know, you're pushed up against a wall, or if you're just on that ship that you know how to pilot, whatever, you're going to use that prop to your advantage. So you get to increase the amount of forced movement by up to 10 feet. If you do, you decide where the forced movement takes you instead of where they wanted to take you. Though you can't end the forced movement in your original space. So you are still going to have to move, but you get to decide where you go. And the big scary thing about forced movement is you're getting pushed somewhere you don't want to go. So this actually could be a really valuable reaction if you're in that case. I don't think it comes up often enough for me to say this is a great take all the time, but it at least has its uses. So while I'm not going to get into all the feats at higher levels, because this one builds on breakaway attack, which is where you grab something from the area and either throw it or hit somebody with it, I want to talk about some of those improvements here. We've got bouncing hurl, and it requires you have breakaway attack. So in this case, you can use breakaway attack as a 2-action activity rather than just for 1 action. You're going to pick up an object, and you're going to make it range strike. So this is just when you're throwing it, but you hit a target, and then it ricochets. So you're going to make a range strike, hit that target, assuming you hit. You can then make a second range strike at the same multiple attack penalty. Remember, there was no press on this, against a different enemies within 15 feet of the first one, and that second enemy doesn't have to be within 20 feet of you. So the strike functions as if it was 1 range increment each time, and yeah, very cool. So it's just you being able to hit 2 creatures at once by throwing an object, and that's just a lot of fun, honestly. Let's see. I think, you know, as we look through here, though, one thing I think is worth mentioning is how many press actions we have here. And there's quite a few. So we will see that coming up. Definitely things building off of your athletics and your acrobatics throughout here. So, you know, I don't love things with press trait, but sometimes they are kind of interesting and fun to look at. So like high flying tumble stunt, for instance, press, risky, and attack. At least you're getting risky out of it, but you're going to leap horizontally during the movement. You can try to move through the space of one enemy. So you're trying to jump right on through them, and you attempt an athletics check against their reflex DC as soon as you enter their space anyway. For success, you get to move through that space. If you don't have enough speed to move all the way through its space, then you get the failure outcome, which we'll get to. Otherwise, the enemy is off guard until the end of your turn. So it can be a jump through them, turn around, and then attack kind of thing. And the success is like critical, except the enemy isn't off guard, but at least you moved through that space you needed to get through. And this is just 1 action, remember. Failure, your movement ends, so you don't actually get through them. And you trigger reactions as if you had moved out of the square. So you're going to trigger reactive strike, which is awful. And crit failure is like failure, but you fall prone first, making it way worse. So high risk, could be good for repositioning yourself, especially getting past some hazard while repositioning, and even possibly setting up for a nice attack, but there's a lot of risk to this stuff. Then we keep going around here. I love breakaway attacks, so I want to keep talking about it. This one's another really fun one. Double breakaway at level 6 here, no extra traits. Again, you can use your breakaway attack as a 2-action activity. You're going to pick up 2 items now, though, and you're going to make a melee strike with both. So you're picking up like 2 bottles and slamming both on the different sides of a creature's head. So you make the strike if you deal damage, so you hit and deal damage, then you deal an extra damage die of damage, and if you critically hit with a strike, the target's also stupefied 1 until the beginning of your next turn. This is very cool. You're probably going to break both bottles, but you're setting up then your allies to get some spells off. I don't know, it's just very fun. I like the idea of a kind of a power attack with random objects. Let's, again, looking around, notice that there's plenty of things with the risky trait. So as you get higher level and you can grab different things with the risky trait, different feats with the risky trait, there's lots of options for what you might want to take. And there are some better ones at higher levels, although, again, lots of them have the press, at least press, if not press and attack traits on them. Not all of them, though, right? We do have some like this one here, rushing stride. You stride at the end of the movement. If you're within melee reach of an enemy, you can make a melee strike against that enemy. If you do, you are off guard against all other enemies except the one you attacked. So this is more, hey, I'm going against a creature that's off to the side all by itself. For 1 action, I can run all the way up to it from whatever distance, 25, 30 feet away, and strike for 1 action, and I gain adrenaline. this is cool. You can't have adrenaline before you do it, but this is a great opener on a turn. So looking down here, we're getting to 8th level here. Again, we're seeing press trait stuff. Lots of the attacks are press trait related. This one makes more sense than most, though, because you have to have missed your first attack, and then you're going to take your weapon around. You're going to make a strike with the same weapon. You get to add backswing, which reduces the penalty even further. So instead of like at a -4 without agile, now you're at -3 because of the backswing, and it increases the size of your damage die by 1 step. So that one actually isn't too bad because it is helping you if you missed and you really want to make a strike. But there are still other risky options here, which is very nice, and even some feats here that don't require actions, which I think is also really helpful. I don't want to get into too many more feats. I want to give my overall impression here in a bit. As we look around here, though, right, we see a little less of the press and attack trait feats that keep coming up, and we keep with the themes that are very fun for us to look at, like knee to the nethers, growing strike, right? In this case, you're going to attempt a grapple. And this is one action. You get to attempt to grapple a creature within your reach. If you succeed, then you get to make an unarmed melee strike against that creature that you've grabbed or restrained. You don't need a free hand because you're using your knee. And if that attack hits and deals damage, the target's also sickened 1. This sounds rough because it's press, which means you're already at multiple attack penalty. But both the grapple and the strike count toward that, but don't increase. So whatever you're at, so you're at a -4 because you've got adrenaline, let's say, -4. And you go for the grapple, you're still at a -4 for the strike, which at least gives you a better chance at landing both. And if you do land both and manage to get them sickened 1, I mean, grabbed, dealt damage, and made a creature sickened 1 for 1 action, yeah, this is a solid press that I would actually consider taking. Just a few other things to call out. There's other feats here that build on earlier things, like rushing stride. So we build on a few. There's not a ton of feat chains other than our breakaway attack, which gets even more things. Storm of Debris, for instance, again, based on breakaway attack. But now you're going to use 3 actions and make attacks against every single enemy within a 15-foot burst within 20 feet of you. So you're just going to hurl items, which sounds so fun. And I love it. And this is how I would do my dex build. I just do dex and strength and just say breakaway attack all over the place. And at a higher level, we have a few options, but, you know, higher level feats, we usually don't get a ton of things here. Daring critical, making us crit on a 19 for sure, as long as it would otherwise still be a hit, which it generally would be. And then we get all the way to 20th level. We actually have a few different options, which is kind of fun. But, you know, it's really what you're looking for. Usually 20th level is what can we use to make everything else kind of easier to pull off from your class. And I think we do have a lot of that here. This is even giving you more options to gain more of those risky feats when you do your start of day. So that's pretty fun in and of itself. And that is it. That is the end of the Daredevil class. So definitely some feelings of swashbuckler here. In fact, I think there's a lot of that same feeling. This is this is like a swashbuckler who's just not as practiced or not as fluid. This is definitely kind of a clumsier, risky feel to it, right? Which is what I think what they wanted to go for. I don't love how much is reliant on press. I think that's going to really harm this class. I know they try to help with it a little bit in your early features, but I just wish it wasn't so dependent there. I absolutely love the breakaway attack stuff. I think that's probably my favorite angle to this entire class. You know, using improvised weaponry around me just sounds like so much fun, and the way they built on it is a really cool system. You can have all sorts of ways to use breakaway attack. In fact, you could build your entire character around it if you really wanted to. And there's some other nice boosts. I wish they had, and there are more in here I didn't talk about, but I do wish they had built a little more off of props and how to use props to your advantage. But there's stuff in here for it, and I do think they brought in the idea in a great way because we just haven't seen that. So there's definitely some positives to this. I'm not always a fan of classes that don't have subclasses, and it's to build your own style, and that's it. Having said that, I think the Guardian was really cool in the end, so I don't think it's universally true for me. And I think this is doing an okay job. I do like a lot of what's in here, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to give some feedback. And I would hope that everybody would take a look at this. And if you can try it out, try it out. If not, at least consider giving some feedback. Whatever that may be, you may completely disagree with me. My feedback is going to probably be around the heavy reliance on press trait feats, because I don't love that so much. But other than that, the only other slight complaint I have is that the identity's a little muddied with something that already exists, but I think it differentiates itself enough that I would play it in a very different way. And that's it. What do you think? Are you excited about trying out a Daredevil? What would your first kind of build idea be? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, adventure on.